so much of our identity is wrapped up in our job.
Over 40% of Gen Z workers are actively sabotaging their company's AI strategy. We've never had a technology that automated thinking, really. Is there anything special about being replaced by machines? It's got to be human and machine. If you are really on top of the game, any change stands a good chance of losing your power.
It's not AI that will replace your job. It's the person that knows it.
Would you rather have those jobs go to robots or to people? That is a fascinating question.
Hey, welcome to another week's podcast. Super excited. We had Stefano Puntoni on the call today. We talk about the AI psychology trap, what smart companies miss that costs them their best people. He talks about AI psychology, impact across competence, autonomy, and relatedness. It's a killer episode. You'll get it straight from academia, connecting it to how we can put it into play in real world business actions and what it means for the future of tomorrow.
Hi, Stefano. Welcome.
Hi, Nick. Great to be here.
We're excited to have you. I've always been a big fan of your research and your program of work. And as we were prepping for this call, Imran and I was kind of just debriefing him. And long before this craziness of AI and generative AI in particular, your work has always sort of looked at this, the intersection of human behavior, human psychology, and technology broadly. And I think it's quite the time for us to be alive in terms of how AI is intersecting and interacting with our psychology. So maybe that's sort of our jump-in point, if you don't mind. I know lots of your research explores the psychological impact of AI and technology, as I said, in the workplace. And so I'm curious what your take is. I know you have a recent paper in the Trends in Cognitive Science. What sort of psychological impact, possibly disruptions, are you seeing when AI is on the scene in terms of how employees are working, and what does that mean for leaders?
Yeah, thanks, Nick, and again, thank you for having me. I find that when I talk to companies, there's an enormous amount of excitement and about deployment of Gen AI among leaders, and a lot of that excitement comes from the promise of this technology to make the business better, opening new opportunities, new ways of working. A lot of it, I think, comes from the promise of saving cost and the idea of obviously, time is money. So if we can be more productive, we can basically do more with less and make the company leaner. So the problem is that when you center the conversation wholly around efficiency and productivity gains, essentially cost cutting, then it becomes a conversation that can be uncomfortable for employees, because clearly that means change that might either require them to perform more for the same amount of input or say headcount, or potentially even undermining their role in organizations by having more and more work outsourced machines, and that may even have give rise to concerns about careers, even jobs. There's a lot of that discussion, and I find that too often those Gen AI deployment programs are not accompanied by a careful reflection on how employees are going to see this and how it's going to impact them. So I think, to me, the starting point of that work was to think a little bit about the worker's psychology, because I think this technology is very different from, say, cloud computing, like the earliest, the most recent major revolution. If you're a user of a computer and now things move to the cloud, it's a massive transformation in the way we're thinking about OTs. It changes from capital investments to pay as you go, and everything, the partnership that you have to forge, and the huge strategic decisions for CTOs and CEOs and CFOs to make. But if I'm writing an email, the email lies on my computer or lies on the cloud, doesn't change anything about the way I write that email. But this technology is different. It will have a benefit for the organization only to the extent that people learn to use it in their job they do, and learn to basically embed it into the workflows of their teams. And so I think this technology requires really careful attention to worker psychology, much more maybe than any previous digital revolution.
Well, that was going to be my next question for you. Is there seems to be two camps. There's the one camp that says this is the biggest invention, technological invention ever, or in the last, thousands of years, printing press, I'm not sure. And then the other camp is no, this is just your kind of recurring every 2 decades or every decade cycle of a new technology. In terms of psychological impact on employees and leaders and organizations large, which camp would you find yourself in?
I mean, we've never had a technology that automated thinking, really. Right? And we've had technology that automated routine thinking. Imagine an Excel file, autocorrect and your processing. I mean, those have had a massive impact on how we think about work and the productivity and the way the knowledge work is being done. But now you are basically going up the value chain, so to speak, of thinking, and you start having algorithms able to engage in pretty high order thinking, from analogical reasoning to, even critical thinking, broadly construed in many ways. And we've never had a machine like that. And so what does it say? In the past, we were tilling the fields, and then, we were able to build automation in agriculture and factories that turned, our jobs from physical labor to cognitive labors. We moved from the factory floor and the field into the office. That change from the blue collar to the white collar has been good for us. And now we have a machine that is coming into the office, and then the question will be, what are we going to do? And we need to find those complementarities, because it's not obvious to me that there is another type of work other than the cognitive work we've been doing. And I'm being reductive here, but I think it is important to consider what is technology good at, what is a human expert good at, and can we leverage those synergies? I always go on and on about the same idea. It's not human or machine. It's got to be human and machine.
Yeah, love that. I'd love to kind of double click on that. I think there's a lot of fear out there for the workforce that AI is going to replace them, and AGI is coming, and we're going to see job losses like we haven't seen job losses. But if you talk about the technology curve, and every new cycle has actually created a lot more types of careers and opportunities out there. Do you see the same with AI?
Yeah, we don't know where this is going to go. If you talk to economists, they tend to align with what you just said. So they would say, people worry about any new technology, and then look later, we had better, safer, better paying jobs than the ones we had before. So why should all of a sudden this no longer be the case? And I think there is certainly a good case for that. You could argue that whenever there is a technology emerging on the horizon, it is easy to spot the threats to existing jobs by that one technology, because it's in front of us. We know what we're doing. This is a line task. You can overlap it with the capabilities of the technology and say, oh, wow, maybe we're not going to be doing it like this anymore. But what we don't know is what new jobs and new tasks and new things will come up because of the technology. And, you told 100 years ago that people would be working as, influencers, and people would say, what the heck? And so basically, you have this asymmetry in the threat and the opportunity, where the threat is more visible earlier than the opportunity in a way for labor. And so I think that's an important point. However, I also like to kind of be balanced there, because the fact that this has happened in previous technological revolution is not destiny.
Yeah.
Be clear.
Is a psychological threat. So there's always a psychological threat that another human could replace us, right? Somebody could come in and do our job better. Is it the same feeling, or is it the same, with AI, or is it different?
Yeah, so that is a fascinating question. Why would you feel threatened by in your competence or your livelihood at work? We have a paper that came out already 6 years ago, actually, in Nature, Human Behavior, where we are asking the question, is there anything special about being replaced by machines? And we have a bunch of, I think, quite cool studies, but I'm going to tell you about one, which I think is kind of fun. We give people like a stylized social dilemma kind of scenarios. It's got nothing to do with real life. It's purely a small window into human psychology, okay? So we tell them that there is an organization that needs to become more efficient, and they can do one or two things. They can either replace current employees with machines, automation, or they can replace current employees with employees of an external supplier, the outsourcing. Okay? And so the outcome is basically the same in terms of the quality of the products and what's happening there. And we tell them, you've got nothing to do with the organization. You just had someone plucked out of the street to come and make that decision for the company. Would you rather have those jobs go to robots or to people? Okay. In that condition, we find almost everybody, about upward of 3/3 of the people, so a large majority tells us, if I can choose, all else being equal, give the job to people. That's kind of maybe altruistic motivation, could be a variety of reasons. But essentially, if I can choose between giving a job to a person or a robot, I'd rather give it to a person. And we have a second condition in the experiments. People were randomly assigned according to RCT. And in the other condition, the text was identical. But now we change the tiny detail and we tell them it is not any job in the company being replaced. It's your job. And so now you get to pick whether you are going to replace by a machine and or a person. And in that condition, what we find is an interesting reversal. I don't know if you experienced that. If I say, okay, in general, I would love people to have jobs, but if you're replacing me in my job, no, I'd rather have a robot actually. The job to do, which is a weird reversal. And I think this is just to go to say that there are social comparison processes that are differential when it comes to replacement from humans and replacement from machines. But what is different now really, that the threat to a worker when a company starts talking very loud about, Gen AI deployment and using Gen AI for everything, like say the Duolingo story that many have read a few weeks back, then the threat is not really, am I gonna be outsourced by my job found out to, let's say an outsourcing company or whatever, or I think more likely that the threat isn't gonna be an algorithm. So I think the threat is really focused now on technology just because the discussion is so intense. But I think it is interesting to think about how is that different from other psychological threats you might have had in other situations.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to our, so much of our identity is wrapped up in our job, in the work that we do. We spend, like half of our waking hours doing that thing. So, I mean, psychologically, does it make sense that a lot of us are possibly freaking out at the presence of this new technology, which a lot of people don't know or can't understand, can't wrap their head around? Would you say that's a fair response?
Yeah, I think freaking out is a scientific term. Yeah, I like it. Yeah, I mean, it's a feeling of unease and say, oh, something's going on. So we in this paper, Nick, that you were just mentioning before, what we do is that we take this very classic kind of well-established, theory in social psychology that I'm sure you know very well, called self-determination theory, being used for a lot of different kind of HR-related sort of insights. And we say, okay, let's look at it from that lens. It's just one framework. You could have taken up many, but I think it's a validated one, a useful one, I believe. And the theory says that the psychological well-being is really emerging from three different parts of your life and three experiences. One is the experience of competence, one is the experience of autonomy, and one the experience of relatedness. And these are really important in the workplace. For example, the issue oftentimes with, say, burnout is when you feel that you're given a lot of responsibility, but you don't have the autonomy to make decisions. And so that being, between kind of a rock and a hard place sort of experience is what leads to burnout. And so I think this is real. I mean, it's important. The work can give you feelings of competence, right? So when you achieve something, you close a deal, you manage to finish a complicated assignment, you feel great about that competence, and it's part of why we feel pride and identity stake in that kind of domain. Autonomy is important to us as human beings. There's a very strong desire to experience being in control of your actions, and this is being documented everywhere. It might be especially strong in Western culture, but it's basically a bit of a universal, I'd say. And then you have relatedness, this idea that feeling connected to other people. And so what we do in the paper is to say, well, in which way, if you want to understand the way in which Gen AI might produce a threat to worker psychology, you can start by looking at threat to competence, threat to autonomy, and threat to relatedness. And so we review recent work, which we kind of group into these buckets and try to sketch the ways in which this can actually take place, and potentially, of course, more than one might be impacted.
Yeah. How many executives out there do you think are aware of SDT, so self-determination theory, and are they thinking about these three facets you just mentioned?
I mean, the CHROs, if they're taking good studies in their domain of expertise, should. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I hope the MBA programs teach it. I'm not entirely sure. Yeah.
I think
probably not many.
Performance cycles and hey, should we do this survey once a year? So I'm not sure if the workforce is spending enough time learning some of these things. Kind of piggybacks the next question of like, how can companies take those three kind of facets and say, are we supporting or are we sort of undermining the workforce based off of them?
Yeah, I think the first step is really diagnosing an issue. You can imagine diagnosing on two levels. One is to understand what kind of competence they need help with. So this will be more the upskilling type discussion. Almost every company has training programs. In our data, we find that that's a bit of a struggle. Those budgets are not going up at the same rate and some of the Gen AI investments. So I don't know. It might be that some organizations are underinvesting in that. But there is also another element to try to pick psychological well-being dimensions. And so it would be very useful for many organizations to have measurement systems, especially if they were at scale and automated, that could detect the likelihood of an employee experiencing feelings of threat when a Gen AI deployment program, or any other program, in fact, I mean, it doesn't have to be Gen AI per se, but to have some kind of like detection tools through either self-report questionnaires or some other maybe more automated type of scalable tools from Slack channels or whatever that one might be able to use to try to infer whether one person, for example, might be engaging in maladaptive coping strategies. We talk about this in the paper. We say, well, if you do experience coping a psychological threat, you're going to respond to that threat with coping. And some coping strategies that we describe in the literature are adaptive. They're going to help the employees and in turn the company. So you're all for that. But you also have coping strategies that are potentially maladaptive, which actually are going to hurt the strategy. I've seen some survey, for example, saying that over 40% of Gen Z workers are actively sabotaging their company's AI strategy. I mean, if your workers want the program to fail, it will fail. I mean, it's as simple as that. Yeah.
That's massive. I'm really curious about the skill strategy and upskilling and what you're seeing out there. You know, part of what we talk a lot about is that skills race is becoming so difficult with AI that you can fundamentally become very good at anything in 30 days or less, right? With some focus time. And how do you keep up with that, right? How do you keep up with that kind of tenacity? And what are you seeing out there? I'm really curious, and especially like the student body too. Like I'm so curious about this.
I do in my course. We have this at the beginning of the course. I ask them what use cases they. And of course, they're not going to tell me about the use cases. They don't want me to know. But they do tell me are amazing. I mean, and actually, I've been talking to executives, and one interesting thing is now, almost 3 years after the arrival of ChatGPT and basically increasing improvements, and we are starting to see, I think this year, from basically this summer to next year too, I think you could argue that we're starting to see AI native talent hitting the workforce. These are people who already quite early in their educational, at least higher educational journey, have started using Gen AI. And my impression, looking at our students and talking to senior leaders who have that experience, I think we have seen nothing of it. I think these people are able to do things like you say. I mean, you can, with the right tools and right mindset and a little bit of practice, it doesn't even take all that long, you might be able to achieve things as a single individual, which would take a team weeks. It's amazing what you can do. But it's hard to, and I think there's a lot of discussions about entry-level positions drying up, like the idea of the AI intern. So why do you need an intern? All these like summer jobs and entry-level positions are going to be under pressure. And I'm sure some of that is true. But it's also true that I think you ask me what you want to do in order to project your company towards the future, hire these people. I mean, those are going to be the ones who are going to lit a fire and make it happen.
Yeah, totally. Looking ahead 3 to 5 years, what do you think will be the biggest AI-related reason companies lose their best people? And what can leaders and organizations start to do to prevent that and guard against that?
Yeah, so I don't think we've seen any data on let's say how AI when poorly implemented, might chase talent away. But there is some evidence, at least in one paper, looking at how people at different levels of ability within a role react to the deployment of AI. If you are really on top of the game, any change stands a good chance of losing you power and bargaining power, or soft power, whatever that is, because now your skills are a little less valuable. Maybe they're a bit more common. Maybe they're just less unique. Maybe it's easier to acquire them. Like, Imran was saying, that you can do a lot with it. So maybe you all of a sudden you're a Python coder ace in this function. Who cares, And so you have that almost like skill obsolescence threat. Obviously, if you're a highly talented employee, it can be an issue. Now, the problem with that is that if your company is using that use case that you find threatening to your unique skills, it is likely that any other companies will be looking to do the same. So there's nowhere to go in that sense. But the question then will be, how do you create those complementarities? Just the same thing I was saying at the very beginning. The goal shouldn't be human or AI, but framing things as a human and AI. I think many organizations don't have the authentic, genuine conversation they need to have with their employees about what this is going to do to the organization. There has to be a mindset where it's going to be a little bit of a sharing the pie. This technology is only going to be useful when employees use it productively. They will use it productively, depending on the stick and the carrot when they have to. Okay, you can do that. But, I think it is wise, based also when we know everything about education and raising kids or whatever, that the stick alone doesn't work. The carrot. And then the question is, what do you offer them that is psychologically reassuring, even exciting about this new world? How do you make them feel like they could be feeling more competent? Imran, your idea of expanding capabilities, or maybe feel more autonomous. Maybe now you are running your own team. You don't, rest on the help of people in other department and analysts to give you whatever. You can do it on your own. And relatedness, perhaps by, the champions within teams, maybe making maybe more time for those relatedness benefiting. Maybe you can now have coffee together, whatever, because you're so much more productive. I've heard companies giving more time off to employees or finding ways of sharing some of those things.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, you started this with, the episode off with this, the point around the overemphasis or the over-indexing on the efficiency gain or, the productivity gain, because you can do something so much more quickly. But the other side to that is you can produce not just as good output, but better, and in that gain the autonomy, the competence, and that relatedness if you're doing it with others. That's the third one is the one that I'm thinking like is the trickier of the three. How can we gain a sense of belongingness or team camaraderie?
Yeah, maybe at least you don't hurt it. I mean, but I think the point you were making about the kind of like top line versus cost. The thing is, a person at the center might see where the costs are. We kind of try to mentorize how people spend the time, and we can figure out this is really time-consuming task. Can we make it better and focus on this cost cutting that way? That's something that Fenter can see, maybe, or the team leaders. The other side, not just I make this distinction between doing things better and doing better things. And the doing things better, like the threat to job, is something you can see easily. And whenever you can get a gain, get it. I'm all for productivity. There's nothing. Of course, companies should be competitive and productive, but the big gains, I believe, are going to come from the second, from doing better things. And who's going to know what better things could be done? It's not some people sitting in central office and the corner office up to the top floor. It's going to be people who are actually on the floor talking to customers, understanding the market, embedded in those workflows. They are the ones who might have the best intuitions and best insights into what better things we might be doing. But they're not going to help you if they feel threatened by this technology. So in a way, there is a double whammy that if you don't do this properly, one, you create an environment where maladaptive coping strategies might be rife, and that really is not going to be conducive to your productivity effort. And second, you might miss out altogether on this doing better things potential for increasing the value that your organization is providing to your customers, because your people are not on board with it. So I think it's really crucial longer term that you have that mindset where this is not about human or machine. I'm not looking at you, how well do you do it? Oh, you don't do it as fast as a machine, let's get rid of you. But thinking about what kind of expertise do you have, which can then be integrated with the capabilities emerging in the machine to make you a super worker. That's a much better pitch to make to an employee.
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of uncertainty. I was talking to a HR leader, and I was like, why are we having this conversation? And she shared that, my CEO wants us to have an AI strategy. And if you talk to the CEO, it's like, hey, why do you want an AI? Our board wants us to, and our investors want us to have an AI strategy. And nobody's really like, what is that AI strategy? And, you talk about cloud, and I remember, early kind of ERP and CRM kind of coming in. We were still taking, like the same 3 pieces of paper, and the blue would go here, the yellow would go here, the white would go here, but we'd input it into a computer at the same time. And there was sort of this like transition period that we sort of saw. I see all of these sort of memes on LinkedIn and other places. It's not AI that will replace your job. It's the person that knows it, and all this sort of fan lore. I think, there's a lot of wait and see, and everybody's looking at it from a cost cutting, because maybe it's the people that are more concerned with the commercialization right now that are interested in how this technology helps. But I really do feel like this can help us cure cancer. This can help us find new, areas of research and development, and move like society forward. And I feel very strongly like that will come. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, to be clear, I mean, if you look at the some of the projections for the economic impact of AI, it has to lie in that transformational discovery process. It cannot be just in shaving some productivity off a work task. You're not going to get the kind of, you're not going to fulfill the promise if that's all we do. But the difficulty is that it's going to take time. So I think, like for any other technology, will be overestimate its impact in the short term and underestimate its impact in the long term. And I think right now we're going through this hype cycle, and to some extent, it's just, natural human that is happening. So now everything is AI. My fridge has AI, whatever, and if then rule is like whatever. It's basically there is that. There is also this idea that you have to have it because everybody's doing it. So, and in a way, I think it is maybe informative for business leaders to think about it, the basic marketing learning. I'm a marketing professor, and the first thing you teach students is to say, well, don't focus on what you do, focus on what you do for the customer. It's not about what you do, about why you're doing it. To some extent, I mean, having a vision of the impact that your actions are going to take in the market. Basically, take a customer orientation, not a product orientation. So, what you do is irrelevant. What is relevant is how that doing helps the customer. That's how you make business. Okay. And in a way, AI is really falling for this myopic view of focusing on the tool itself. It's shiny objects, and it's complex, and it's new, and takes a lot of money, and nobody knows, and there's a lot of uncertainty, like you said. So it's natural that you put all your focus on the technology, but that's not going to help. What's going to help is to think about what's the technology for. I mean, how are you going to use this technology as a vehicle for improving your customer relationship, your customer lifetime value? Your customer experience, your customer satisfaction. All of these are more proximal indices of the ultimate measure of success, which is to the extent to which your customers feel what you do adds value to them. And I think that's what you should always be sharp focused on. And your CTO can focus on the vendors, and they can focus on the integration, and they can focus on the data, and they can focus on the privacy, all of that. Okay. But the CEO, the people who are making the more strategic side of the decision, they ought to be thinking about, what that does for the customer. It might be an internal customer. It could be an HR, the employee is a customer when you take a, Gen AI deployment internally. But essentially, it's about the impact it has.
You've been gracious with your time, Stefano, and really appreciate it. One final question for you, and the rule is it's either yes or no. Okay, you can't explain why. Okay. Do you say please and thank you when you're chatting with your AI of choice?
I used to, I stopped.
Okay. We'll leave it at that as a cliffhanger. Stefano, thank you so much. Always such wisdom and such insight. So we really appreciate it. And thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks so much.